The date is April 18th. Before the first light penetrates the oppressive tropical canopy of Guadalcanal, Henderson Field is already alive. The heavy, humid air is saturated with the pungent odor of high-octane aviation fuel and jungle decay. 18P 38 Lightning fighters, sleek in silver, await their crews. The pilots standing beside them are startlingly young, their faces illuminated fleetingly by the glow of cigarettes or the narrow beam of a flashlight. These were not the hardened veterans of the Pacific War, but men barely removed from their college campuses. 24-year-old Tom Lanphier and 23-year-old Rex Barber were representative of this youthful cohort. Yet, within 4 hours of takeoff, this group of relatively inexperienced American aviators was slated to execute a mission that would eliminate Japan's most cherished admiral and irrevocably alter the strategic calculus of the Second World War. The extraordinary tension of the moment lay in the fact that the actual identity of their target remained a closely guarded secret. Major John Mitchell, the mission commander, stood before the assembly, a map unrolled in the dim light. His voice, sharp and precise, cut through the stillness of the tropical night. "Gentlemen, we're going after a VIP. The mission brief is chillingly concise. The pilots, exchanging grim, knowing glances, understand the magnitude of the target. A high-value personality whose elimination warrants risking 18 fighter crews on a 435-mile flight path, a journey deemed by any standard a suicide mission. To achieve this extraordinary range, auxiliary fuel tanks have been affixed to their aircraft, transforming the nimble fighters into slow, cumbersome targets, sitting ducks should they encounter any aerial opposition. Unbeknownst to these airmen, exactly 435 miles distant, the target himself, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, is sitting down to his final breakfast. The incredible historical irony unfolding here is profound. Yamamoto is no ordinary Japanese commander. He is the undisputed architect of the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, a figure whose very name has become synonymous with treachery and is cursed by the American public. Yet, obscured by the legend of destruction, is a critical fact. Yamamoto never advocated for this conflict. To truly grasp the complexity of the man, we must rewind the clock to 1920. Picture him then, a young, astute Japanese naval officer, immersed in the halls of Harvard University, dedicated to studying economics and petroleum resources, and famously mastering complexities of poker with. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was not blinded by hubris. Having toured American oil fields as a student, he had witnessed firsthand the staggering scale of the nation's industrial capacity and its vast resources. When Japanese leaders spoke of war with the United States, his chilling response was a stark prophecy. "I can run wild for 6 months or maybe a year, but after that I have utterly no confidence." Though duty demanded he planned the attack on Pearl Harbor, he knew privately that Japan was effectively signing its own death warrant by provoking the American industrial giant. Now, on this fateful April morning in 1943, that grim prediction was set to become a reality in the most intensely personal manner. At Rabaul Airfield, Yamamoto's staff was riddled with anxiety. His aide frantically urged him to change the flight schedule. General Imamura, who had been nearly shot down just weeks prior, issued a dire warning about the concentration of American fighters in the area. Even Vice Admiral Ozawa offered to provide an overwhelming fighter escort. Yamamoto, however, rejected every precaution, understanding that showing even a flicker of fear or doubt would catastrophically crush the already fragile morale of his fighting men. The 59-year-old fleet admiral, Isoroku Yamamoto, prepared for his final flight. He ascended into the cockpit of his Betty bomber, his ceremonial samurai sword resting beside him. Locked securely in his personal safe was a poem dedicated to his mistress, its concluding sentiment chillingly prescient. "The body is frail, yet the spirit is strong." Far to the southeast, for 135 miles distant, the American counter-operation commenced. Precisely at 7:10 a.m., 18P 38 Lightnings roared down the runway at Henderson Field. This was a mission defined by razor-thin logistics. Each aircraft was burdened with 2 massive drop tanks, one standard, and one oversized 330-gallon tank, specially ferried in from New Guinea. The mathematics of the flight were unforgiving. They possess the absolute minimum fuel required to reach the intercept coordinates, allowing perhaps 20 minutes of engagement before a mandatory retreat or a catastrophic plunge into the Pacific. Major Mitchell spearheaded the formation, hugging the waves at an altitude of just 50 feet. For more than 2 agonizing hours, the only sound was the incessant thunder of the twin Allison engines and the spray whipping across their windscreens as they maintained absolute radio silence across the vast ocean expanse. These young pilots were executing the most technically demanding navigation mission of the Pacific conflict, relying solely on compass readings and complex dead reckoning, a feat that would strain even modern airline crews. The true advantage, however, lay not in their skill, but in the intelligence apparatus. American codebreakers had labored for 48 consecutive hours to decrypt Admiral Yamamoto's precise itinerary. They possessed his exact schedule, his intended route, and the crucial detail that he would occupy the lead aircraft among 2 G4M Betty bombers, escorted by 6 Zero fighters. This seemingly impossible, flawless intelligence created the perfect trap. At precisely 9:30 a.m., the P-38 Lightnings reached the western coast of Bougainville Island. Major John Mitchell confirmed his watch. They were 3 minutes ahead of schedule. After a 435-mile flight skimming the wave tops, navigated solely with 1940s equipment, the accuracy was breathtaking. Then, with the dramatic timing of fate itself, the 2 enemy bombers materialized on the horizon. Exactly as predicted, it was 9:34 a.m. The moment that would indelibly mark the history of both warring nations had arrived. Bogies, 11 o'clock high. The silence of the high altitude was shattered as the radio frequency burst to life, confirming the sighting for the 18 American pilots. Yet, immediate confusion plagued the mission. Intelligence reports had strictly specified a single Betty bomber, but the visual confirmation revealed 2 distinct G4M aircraft. The critical question hung in the air: which plane carried Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto? The Japanese formation maintained precise altitude of 6,500 feet, featuring the 2 twin-engine Betty transports, closely shielded by an escort of 6 Zero fighters. Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, sat obliviously in the lead aircraft, his precise location and itinerary having been ruthlessly exposed by his own communications. In the trailing Betty, his chief of staff, Admiral Gaki, peered through the plexiglass, likely contemplating the routine inspection awaiting them. Neither senior officer realized their lives were now measured in mere minutes. As the Americans prepared for the fatal dive, external fuel tanks were jettisoned and the P-38s began their climb. But disaster struck instantly. A catastrophic mechanical failure prevented one of the designated killer flight, Lightning fighters from releasing its auxiliary tank, rendering the burdened aircraft instantly uncontrollable. The initial assault had failed, forcing both the lead pilot and his wingman out of the engagement. Now, the entire burden of Operation Vengeance rested upon the shoulders of just 2 P-38 pilots, Tom Lanner and Rex Barber. These 2 young airmen faced not only Japan's greatest admiral, but also his formidable Zero fighter escort. The Zeros dubbed the Intercept, yet the P-38 Lightning, specifically selected for this long-range interdiction, proved too swift. Its reputation for devastating firepower was well earned. For heavy .50 caliber machine guns complemented by a powerful 20mm cannon. When this concentrated ordnance struck the lightly armored structure of the Japanese Betty bombers, the outcome was guaranteed to be catastrophic. Rex Barber's aircraft shuddered violently as Japanese defensive fire tore through the fuselage. An inspection would later count 104 distinct bullet holes. Yet, Barber maintained his attack run, his 20mm cannon spitting high-explosive shells directly into lead Betty's vulnerable structure. The effect was not mere damage. The bomber instantaneously began to disintegrate under the sheer kinetic force. From the cockpit of the second Betty, Admiral Gaki watched in stark horror as his commander's aircraft, now a crippled mass, began trailing thick, inescapable black smoke. The moment of recognition was one of visceral shock. Moroe, the air staff officer, later recorded the raw terror in his diary. "I just said to myself, my God, I could think of nothing else." Seizing the officer's shoulder, he pointed toward the lead aircraft and urgently declared, "Look at the commander-in-chief's plane." This horrific, Fleeting sight became Moroi's permanent parting with the Admiral. Although the entire aerial engagement spanned barely 20 minutes, the fate of Yamamoto was sealed instantly. Within seconds of the initial strike, his Mitsubishi G4 and Betty bomber was fatally crippled, spiraling uncontrollably into the dense jungle canopy. The second Betty, transporting Chief of Staff Admiral Igaki, met a different, equally violent fate, slamming into the ocean at maximum velocity. Miraculously, Igaki survived a catastrophic impact, finding himself adrift in the Pacific, forced to watch the ominous column of black smoke rising from the jungle, the silent testament to the death of his commander and closest friend. Meanwhile, the youthful American pilots were blissfully unaware of the monumental strategic blow they had just delivered. Burning precious fuel at an alarming rate, they raced desperately back toward Guadalcanal, convinced they had merely intercepted and destroyed another routine Japanese transport. Tom Lanner and Rex Barber were already embroiled in a heated argument over who deserved credit for confirmed kill. The controversy over who fired the fatal shots would become a bitter, lifelong dispute consuming the American pilots involved. The following morning, the reality of the mission began to unfold on the ground. Japanese search teams, driven by desperate hope, hacked relentlessly through the dense, unforgiving jungle terrain of Bougainville, tracing the faint smoke trail left by Yamamoto's catastrophic crash. What they uncovered was a scene destined to haunt the Japanese high command permanently. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's body had been violently ejected from the wreckage, yet he remained solemnly strapped into his seat. In a final, chilling gesture of military honor, his right hand still firmly clutched his samurai sword. The subsequent autopsy confirmed the speed of the attack. 2 distinct bullet wounds, one piercing his jaw and a second striking his shoulder, revealed that the Admiral had been killed instantly, moments before the bomber even impacted the earth. The official medical report, recognizing the immense symbolic weight of the man, described his remains as being found in a state of great dignity. For the stunned recovery team, this was not merely a casualty. This was a fall of their preeminent naval strategist, the mastermind who had delivered the stunning, audacious victory at Pearl Harbor, the man the entire nation revered. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, previously considered untouchable, had been reached. Flying 435 miles into the deep Pacific on a daring mission executed against all probability, the American P-38 pilots successfully intercepted and eliminated the architect of Pearl Harbor, Japan's most critical military leader. The resultant psychological shockwave was immediate and crippling. The Imperial High Command understood the magnitude of this loss and desperately attempted to contain the damage, concealing Yamamoto's death for an entire month as they grappled with the strategic implications of this unprecedented breach of security. When the devastating news was finally released to the public on May 21st, the nation plunged into a period of profound and collective mourning, a depth of grief unmatched since the passing of the Emperor's own father. Yet, within this grand historical tragedy lay a deeply human drama. The chaotic 20 minutes of aerial combat permanently altered the lives of the men who flew the mission. Major Tom Lanner leveraged the incident for decades, relentlessly claiming singular credit for shooting down Yamamoto, granting interviews, publishing articles, and achieving notoriety as a definitive victor. But the story was far more complex, particularly for Captain Rex Barber, whose P-38 Lightning came back with. The controversy surrounding the cockpit persisted for decades, fueled by Lanphier's insistence, despite his aircraft bearing 104 bullet holes, that he alone had delivered the fatal blow. This bitter argument was only settled posthumously. In 1991, for years following Lanphier's death, an official U.S. Air Force investigation concluded decisively that it was Barber, not Lanphier, who fired the shots that killed Admiral Yamamoto. Consequently, Lanphier's A status was revoked. His official kill count was formally reduced from 5 to 4. Yet, the deeper tragedy lay in profound ignorance of these young men regarding the true weight of their accomplishment. They had eliminated not merely Japan's greatest naval strategist, but a man of 59, old enough to be a grandfather, who privately harbored profound opposition to the very war he was compelled to command. For the Empire of Japan, the loss of Yamamoto was akin to having their primary navigational compass snatched away mid-storm. His replacement, Admiral Minichi Koga, would later grimly acknowledge the void. There was only one. The operational void left by Yamamoto's death proved strategically irreparable. Japanese Naval Command, suddenly deprived of its most innovative mind, would never regain the strategic initiative. Critically, the ripple effects extended far beyond military tactics. Operation Vengeance did not merely eliminate a commander, it shattered the deeply ingrained Japanese belief in their own invincibility. If American forces could penetrate the deepest lines of defense to strike their most protected leader, then no sanctuary remained safe. This profound psychological warfare victory proved arguably more valuable than any fleet engagement. Admiral Mado Magaki, the sole surviving witness to the catastrophic loss, was emotionally scarred by the trauma. Though he continued to serve, commanding Japanese battleships at Leyte Gulf, the war's trajectory was already irrevocably set. In August 1945, merely hours after Emperor Hirohito officially announced Japan's surrender, Magaki climbed into a kamikaze aircraft for his self-appointed final mission. He was shot down and killed, becoming, in essence, the final kamikaze pilot of World War II, tragically attempting to join his fallen commander in death. This deeply personal account powerfully illustrates the profound and human cost exacted by the war's climax. Beyond the abstract calculus of modern weaponry and global conflict, the true pivot of war lies in the hands of individuals making desperate, split-second decisions that irrevocably alter the course of history. Consider the almost unbelievable chain of human endeavor. American cryptographers, driven by urgency, labor for 48 continuous hours to unlock a single, decisive message. This vital intelligence guided 18 untested young pilots through the most challenging navigational mission of their careers. Simultaneously, a high-ranking Japanese admiral, fully cognizant of his nation's impending doom, fought on, driven solely by the rigid demands of duty. All these disparate threads converged violently in 20 minutes of intense aerial combat, irrevocably shifting the strategic balance of the Pacific War. Fundamentally, this narrative underscores that individual character remains the ultimate variable. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, was also a man of profound honor who privately cautioned against the conflict. The American aviators displayed extraordinary courage and precision, and Admiral Mado Magaki demonstrated a final, unyielding loyalty unto death. These figures were not the simplified heroes or villains of wartime propaganda. They were complex human agents, inextricably caught within the colossal machinery of global conflict, each striving to fulfill their duty as they perceived it. When reflecting upon the continuous cycle of modern military engagements, one must return to the pivotal events of April 18, 1943. Behind every high-level strategic decision, every tactical engagement, and every solemn casualty report reside the intensely personal human narratives of courage, tragedy, honor, and profound loss. History transcends the movements of nations and the deployment of armies. It is fundamentally about the people involved. It is about the young American pilots who never anticipated the burden of killing a legend, the Japanese admiral who perished clutching his ancestral sword, and the chief of staff who desperately sought to follow his commander into death. In merely 20 minutes, involving 18 fighters and 2 bombers, the trajectory of World War II was irrevocably altered. The sheer, unwavering courage displayed by both combatants on April 18, 1943, defines this consequential moment. The true lesson of this operation affirms that heroism is not confined by uniform or flag. It is defined by individual resolve tested under the most extreme pressure. This account of impossible odds and the consequences of split-second decisions fundamentally alter the trajectory of the war. History, we are reminded, is ultimately written not by grand strategy or dates and battles alone, but by the people who face impossible choices. The enduring legacy of such human conflict is often encapsulated in personal artifacts. Consider the final, stark image: Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's ceremonial samurai sword, retrieved from the tangled wreckage of the jungle crash site. This relic now rests within the quiet halls of a Tokyo museum. It stands as a profound, silent testament to the day when just 20 minutes of aerial combat irrevocably shifted the balance of power in the Pacific War.